Today, we are going to be talking about some cultural shocks. When somebody sees a man with a scarf wrapped around his neck, we automatically think he is gay. If you leave an empty water bottle on the table, it means that there will be no money for you in the future. Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel Afro Lev, roaring truths to preserve your pretty voice. And today it is a snowy day in Moscow. If you would like to support the channel, please like, subscribe and leave a comment. And if you would like to donate a coffee to me, there is a PayPal link that is in the description. Feel free to hit that and support the channel. Right, today we are going to be talking about some cultural shocks as an African man living in Moscow, Russia. Some of my cultural shocks are a bit strange, but I will start immediately. This is not clickbait, so let me get straight into it. It's snowing outside. It is turning into a white affair. The streets are covered in snow right now. And it reminded me of an interesting culture shock that I recently realized, because this is only my second winter in Moscow, but I've never really felt the full-fledged of winter. Anyway, scarves. Scarves are a cultural shock. Bear with me. Back home, African men, Zimbabwean men, wrap a scarf around their neck in the middle of summer to indicate that they play for the other team. Yes. When somebody sees a man with a scarf wrapped around his neck, we automatically think he is gay. Funny enough, when I came to Moscow, a scarf is very necessary, or else you get sick. You need to wrap it around your neck, or you will suffer the full wrath of winter. So I didn't even know how to put on a scarf. It was pretty hilarious when my wife was there teaching me how to put on a scarf, because I knew absolutely nothing about putting a scarf on my neck. So there you go, the first strange cultural shock for me. Another shock for me here was that there are a lot of superstitions in Russia that I kind of had to adapt to. One of them being, you cannot leave empty water bottles on a table. If you leave an empty water bottle on the table, it means that there will be no money for you in the future. You will be bankrupt. So this is a superstition that I kind of had to adapt to, because every time when I was drinking water or I was having something before my online classes, I would leave the bottle on the table and my wife would be like, no, don't do that. You know, we're gonna be broke in the future if you leave the water bottle on the table. So every time I finished my bottle of water, I'd put it on the side or I put it on the ground. And I did this when I visited my family back in Botswana last year. And they were always wondering why after I drank water, I would put it on the ground, because that basically signifies that you will be broke in the future. You'll be bankrupt. So keep the bottles away from the tables, put them on the ground. Another superstition that I've also come to realize is that you do not pass things through the threshold of any door. So basically you have the door, you have the inside and the outside, right? When you're giving somebody something, you're not supposed to put your hand through the door and from the inside to the outside and hand it to them. This is bad luck. You're supposed to come in and then hand it over. So every time I was rushing to work and I said to my wife, here, take it. She's like, no, come in and hand it to me. That's another superstition. And another superstition that is quite interesting is you're not supposed to whistle in the house. My family, Zimbabweans, Africans, generally we are born with this rhythm, whistling, jumping around, dancing, the stereotypical thing when everybody thinks that an African can dance. And for me, whistling was a common thing. You're not supposed to whistle in a Russian household. You've got to keep it to yourself. Don't whistle. It is also bad luck. The last superstition is also when we are traveling somewhere far, we are all supposed to sit down and wait a bit and then leave. So for example, if I'm traveling to another country, I wouldn't just get my stuff and go. No, in Russia, you should take your stuff, sit down for a second with the family, for like a few seconds, and then you leave. It's to help you make sure that you don't forget anything, and it's also so that your trip is smooth. So these superstitions weren't such a huge thing for me, but I kind of had to adapt and adjust my mind because some of these things were very basic. Finish the water bottle, put on the table, pass something through the threshold. Very interesting. But I feel like I'm more Russian than my Russian friends because the younger generation, especially some of my students, they don't know some of these things. So I'm kind of there like telling them all these superstitions. They're like, okay, grandpa. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. Another interesting superstition, lights. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, lights. Back home, we leave lights on all the time, especially when we are not there to sort of indicate that somebody's home. In my neighborhood, there were a lot of petty, really, really petty thefts. For example, stealing car batteries, stealing shoes, stealing pants, stealing anything that is basically out in the open. So when the light is on, it kind of discourages people to rob you because they think somebody is inside the house. In Russia, I guess it's because of the light bill. I don't really know if this is a culture shock. Everyone turns off their lights, even if they are not leaving, but if they're not using the room. So my wife and I would basically leave the apartment and go to stay with my babushka, right? And I would leave the lights on because I was like, the thieves will see that the lights are on and everything will be okay. And she came back and she was like, what? Why are the lights still on? And I explained and she's like, no, we're pretty safe because it's pretty safe in Moscow. It's not the same. Nobody's going to break in and steal your shoes. No, it's pretty safe. So I basically had to adjust my mind. But this was one that actually was pretty much fixed very quickly because I would see the power bill every time I would do this. And I did not like the results because I had to pay a lot more money for not turning off the light. Another interesting cultural shock is the coffee culture. I am also indulging. In Moscow, especially, everybody needs a coffee to function. The life is extremely fast. Back home, if I ordered a coffee, somebody would look at me like, ooh, fancy, right? We predominantly drink tea. Russians also drink tea. They really love their tea. But in Moscow especially, people have this, obsession with coffee because it helps them, get through the day. Especially if you live in a big place like Moscow. It's really quick. It's fast. So you need to be in a situation when you're fueled all the time. So I found myself downing 2 cups of coffee, or at least 1 cup of coffee a day, just to function. And it was so strange because my wife in the beginning would be like, let's get some coffee. And I'll be like, why? And then here I am like, hey, let's get some coffee. She's like, oh, this is a far cry from what you actually used to say when we first met. So that's a pretty funny one. But generally, life in Russia is not that different from back home. I mean, there are little things that shock me, but there are also things that kind of bring us all together. For example, I'll give one before we go. When people lock eyes, they greet each other. Hello is such an important thing, even with a stranger. If you lock eyes with a stranger, the same in my country, you say hello. I lived in China for like 7 years, and people, especially strangers, they could look at you, they could stare right into your eyes and not say hello. But Africans and Russians have a similar culture where it's like, if we lock eyes, we greet each other. Greetings are extremely important. I've actually forgotten one more. There's one that I've forgotten. And it's greeting. It's funny. This will be the last one. In Russia, people find it strange when I ask them how they are. Because in my country, you ask, how are you? But you don't really want to know how the person is. So I found myself in very strange situations because I'm like, how are you? And they're like, oh, what does he want to know? Or they start pouring out their deepest pain to me. Like, oh, my wife left me and this happened, etc. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is heart-wrenching. I'm so sorry. But for me, it's just a greeting. It is a greeting. So I say, hi, how are you? And the person is just supposed to say, fine. because this is my culture. But when I say it to my Russian friends and my Russian family, they're like, why is he asking me how I am? Does he really want to know how I am? Okay, let me tell him about my problems. So it's also something that I found pretty hilarious every time I would ask my students, how are you? And they would end up pouring their deepest, darkest pain, even tear up while telling it. When back home, people just ask you, how are you? But they genuinely don't care. It's actually the same with the smiling. In my country, anybody will smile at you. It's pretty fake. They will smile at you. Oh, hi, how are the kids? Yeah, bitch, right? In Russia, when a Russian person smiles at you, they really like you. And people think Russian people are like not very kind because they don't smile a lot. But when they smile at you, it's genuine. It's very genuine. I don't know if I've kind of broken the curse because all my students smile at me, all my friends smile at me, people on the street smile at me. And when they do smile at you, it's a genuine smile. Compared to where I'm from, people just smile at you because it's polite, but they can have the fakest intentions within them that you might actually be shocked to find out. I know many people that have smiled at me for years, but would probably hang me if they had the chance. So, alright guys, thank you for watching. I hope you found this very useful and interesting. It was pretty fun to share my culture shocks. If you enjoy this, I can make a part 2. And please like, subscribe, join the Telegram group. It's growing every day. You know, I'd love to see you guys in there. I'd like to have some chats with you. I would like to grow our community. And thank you so much for helping me choose the logo. I think you guys have seen the logo on every platform. We are growing slowly but surely. Alright guys. As always, we are roaring truths to preserve your pretty voice. Ciao.